There are so many lines of dialogue and also lyrics in Hindi cinema which endure from generation to generation, like this one. Kahin pe nigahein, kahin pe nishana. You know what that means when you are pretending to aim at something but actually targeting something else. Now this comes from a 1956 film, CID with Devanand. That was the biggest hit of that year. It was also the debut film for Wahida Rahman. She wasn't the heroine of the film. She has sung this song in the film in the voice of Shamshad Begum. Now since then this metaphor has been used, and I've been made to think of this twice in the past 24 hours. One, because of something that happened very close to where I stand now, just over a mile away, a mile to my right is Lal Killa, Red Fort. That's where Prime Minister Narendra Modi addressed a Sikh congregation on the 400th Prakashotsav of Guru Tegh Bahadur, the 9th Sikh Guru. And he spoke about how Emperor Aurangzeb, driven by his bigotry, had asked Guru Tegh Bahadur to convert to Islam, and because he did not, he stood by his faith, he was beheaded. So he took us back to 1675. That is the later half of 17th century. Now that is one thing. Now the other thing that happened was across the border in Pakistan. So I began seeing a lot of references in the Pakistani media, and then senior Pakistani journalist also alerted me to this, that Imran Khan has been making repeated references in his speeches, because he is holding these big jalsas in all the cities of Pakistan. He is meeting repeated references to Mir Jaffer. Now Mir Jaffer, as we know, is an infamous traitor of the Battle of Plassey. He was the commander of Nawab Siraj ud-Daulah's armies. Now the day of the battle, I mean that's the story, he had signed up his deal with East India Company much earlier, couple of months earlier. But the fact is, on the day of the Battle of Plassey, he wasn't there and the army command chief wasn't there, and he told his army not to fight, and then we know the rest is history. That enabled the British, namely East India Company at that point, because they were in that avatar, to take over Bengal and then the rest of India, and they didn't go for a long time after that. So just as in the subcontinent's history, Aurangzeb is seen as a very tough, very bigoted, very orthodox ruler after three other Mughals who weren't quite as rigid, beginning with Akbar, Jahangir and then Shah Jahan. It's widely believed that Aurangzeb it is who brought back that hard Islamist reign in India, and thereby lots of stories of excesses, of atrocities, particularly because of his continuing war, never-ending wars in the Deccan, especially with the Marathas. Now he is the one who executed Guru Tegh Bahadur. Similarly, in the subcontinent's history, Mir Jaffer is seen as one of the great traitors, in the same category, say, as Jaichand of Kannauj, who supposedly betrayed Prithviraj Chauhan, and maybe some others in history in other parts of India. Now, why were these two references made by two prominent leaders? And that is what reminded me of Kahin pe nigahein, kahin pe nishana. So, what was Mr. Modi referring to? Mr. Modi was trying to remind the Sikhs, and through them and through on this occasion all of India, particularly his voters, who are Hindu voters, most predominantly Hindu voters, to say that, see, Aurangzeb was a Mughal ruler, a Muslim ruler who was a tyrant. He ordered a holy Sikh Guru, the 9th Guru, to be executed because he refused to convert to Islam, and the Guru had come here to plead or to argue with the Mughal ruler Aurangzeb to spare the lives of Hindu Pandits in Kashmir. So in a way, it was a sideways signal. It was a signal to the Sikhs that, look, through history, you've been persecuted by the Muslims. And second, it was also a signal to the Hindus, reminding them of Aurangzeb, of the reign of Aurangzeb. That is why, while he might have been paying his tribute to Guru Tegh Bahadur, that was the political angle. That's why kahin pe nigahein, kahin par nishana. But this is much simpler. This is much simpler and not quite as complex and interesting as what's happening in Pakistan. Now, Imran Khan, in all his speeches, in fact, even before he had lost the vote of confidence, in his big speech to the nation on his national TV, he had invoked two traitors from the subcontinent's history. He was careful only to choose Muslim traitors. So one he said was Mir Jaffer, who betrayed Siraj ud-Daulah, so the British came to rule that part of India. And second he said was Mir Sadiq, who betrayed Tipu Sultan, so British conquered that southern part of India. But lately he has not been talking about Mir Sadiq as much as Mir Jaffer. Now the interesting thing is, why is he saying that? As he's talking about Mir Jaffer, his supporters, some of his key people, are also sharing on their Facebook pages, through their contacts on WhatsApp, some clips from a website called pakistanhistory.com. From that website, they are sharing the history of Mir Jaffer. Now suddenly, so why is Imran Khan suddenly thinking of Mir Jaffer and carrying on and on? And why are his people then sharing this little brief history of Mir Jaffer with so many of their contacts? That's because the insinuation is that Mir Jaffer was the army chief, Bakshi as they were called, Sipar Salar or Senapati or the army chief of Siraj ud-Daulah, who betrayed Siraj ud-Daulah to the enemy. In this case, who's the army chief in Pakistan? And who does Imran Khan blame for having let him down or having plotted against him or having joined the plotters against him to get him out of power? Obviously, he cannot openly say it's the army chief, General Bajwa. But this way, by going on and on, dog whistling about Mir Jaffer, Mir Jaffer, Mir Jaffer, the army chief, he's making the same insinuation. And that's why this is also a case of कहीं कहीं पे निगाहें, कहीं पे निशाना. Now Mir Jaffer was born Sayyid Mir Muhammad Jaffer in 1691. There's no connection between the Tegh Bahadur event and this event. It just so happens coincidentally that both events are generally located in the same epoch in our history. So he was born in 1691. He was a very poor man. As I read up on him, he was a very poor man, penniless in fact, but he rose in life. He joined the service of the Nawab of Bengal at that point, who was Ali Wardi Khan. And he was very hardworking, very talented. From an ordinary sepoy or ordinary servant of the Nawab, he rose to become the Nawab's army chief. He earned enough adulation and admiration of the Nawab to marry his daughter as well. So he became the Nawab's son-in-law. And as usually happens in those cases, the moment he became a member of the family, he began plotting to get the Nawab out of power, basically get him assassinated and to ascend his throne. His first effort to do so failed. But it so happened that Nawab, who had now anointed his grandson, his maternal grandson, so Nawab was Nana, the maternal grandson Siraj ud-Daulah, to be his successor. And he began to groom him. He made him shift to his house. He started going out to battles with him, military operations with him. And at the age of 23, when Nawab Ali Wardi Khan died, his grandson Siraj ud-Daulah ascended the throne. But once again, Sayyid Mir Muhammad Jaffer, who was generally called Mir Jaffer, he did not like it because he wanted that throne. He wanted neither the Nana nor his grandson to be the ruler on that throne. He wanted it for himself. So he began plotting against Siraj ud-Daulah from day one. At some point, this is within 1 year of Siraj ud-Daulah at the age of 23 ascending to power, Mir Jaffer gets in touch with the British, starts conspiring with them, with some other people, and signs a treaty with the British on 1st May of 1757 to say that when you go to war with Siraj ud-Daulah, I will be on your side. And he continued to be the army chief. And then we know what happened. The Battle of Plassey took place on 23rd of June 1757. It was over very soon because Siraj's army didn't exactly know what they were doing there because their commander-in-chief didn't want them to fight. So that battle was over. Siraj ud-Daulah tried to escape, but he was taken prisoner by East India Company and later executed. He was executed by Mir Jaffer and his son Mir Miran in Murshidabad on instructions from East India Company because they were not going to forgive anybody who had dared to challenge their authority. This was the 18th century, right? Mid-18th century. It was a very tough period of history. So the place where Siraj ud-Daulah was executed actually has been named, has been called since then Namak Haram Deodi. Namak Haram Deodi means literally the traitor's gate. And even the Haveli or the palace in which Mir Jaffer used to live is now called Namak Haram Palace. So Namak Haram Deodi and Namak Haram Palace. Now, what happened to Mir Jafar is interesting afterwards, because if Imran Khan is making that comparison, as people suspect he is, because his eye is on Mir Jafar, आंखें मीर जाफर पर हैं, but his aim or target, nishana, is General Bajwa. Then should be interesting to see what happened to Mir Jafar. So briefly after this, after Siraj ud-Daulah died, as per his treaty with the British, he took over power in Bengal. But that did not last very long, because soon enough the British started making too many demands on him. He tried to fight the British. He joined the Dutch. So how do you fight one colonial power? You join hands with another colonial power. So he joined hands with the Dutch, but in the Battle of Chinsura, East India Company defeated him and the Dutch. So he was deposed again. He lost power. As he lost power, his son-in-law Mir Qasim, he became the ruler of Bengal. So see how this is progressing. Mir Jafar was the son-in-law of Ali Vardi Khan, who took the father-in-law's place. Now his son-in-law Mir Qasim took over his place, Mir Jafar's place. But Mir Qasim also began to have problems with East India Company. Then he had his battle of Buxar with them, which also he lost. And once again, East India Company came back, and after overthrowing him, after overthrowing his son-in-law, restored Mir Jafar in the same throne, where he then reigned from 1764 to 1765, a second reign, until he died in 1765. So that's the history. So we don't know whether Imran Khan has thought through all of this, although Imran Khan keeps saying, I have read history, I have read literature, I have read political science, all at Oxford. So maybe he has read his history also, maybe he's making all these comparisons, and maybe he's for once being really profound with his references to the history. Either way, we thought it was interesting that these two references in completely different contexts came up. Both have a deeper political meaning, and that's why it might be interesting for all of us to go into these. In fact, if you ask me, I find this fascinating, because almost anything that's happening anywhere in the world at any point of time is rooted someplace in the history. Particularly, this is particularly true of the subcontinent.